In this video, I'd like to show you how to paint mountains, or how I paint mountains. There are a variety of different ways. This time I will be showing you with a flat palette knife. And this flat palette knife is very small. Very small, and it doesn't have really sharp edges, so it's not like a knife that can cut through things. It's very dull in a way. And the palette knife, I'll be using different positions, and I'll be talking about these positions as I paint. You can see me now, I'm just outlining the mountain that I want to do, or a range of mountains. This is the one that's pretty close, this particular one. The other one I did similarly, I just kind of set it a little bit to the back. So the first step is to just kind of mix up a nice dark color. So in this case I used Ivory Black oil color, Ultramarine oil color, and I also used Alizarin Crimson oil color. So after I apply this color, I mix it all up nicely, and then I use my knife to outline. You can use a brush as well to outline. With a 1-inch brush now, I'm just kind of softening everything. The only thing about the 1-inch brush, I would say, is it doesn't have the nice chisel edge on the brush, right? So there's no color on this one, but you can form the chisel edge if you need to with applying lots of color on the bristles. This is a hog bristle brush. And the next thing here that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my shop towels to even take care of even more of the outlines here and the contours of the tops of the mountain and the edges of the mountain. This simultaneously removes the excess paint that I'm going to not need anymore, because I'm going to be layering the shadow and the highlight over this. So in a way, this is my base layer for my shadow and my highlight. Or sometimes even you can do snow. So if you go straight to titanium white, you can create some snow effects in there as well. So just kind of softening this part on the bottom here. This will be my hazy part where my mist will go. So I decided to remove a little bit more of the paint here with the shop towel. So you can see that the paint is very pigmented, right? There's not much oil on it. It's not very shiny. So titanium white here and alizarin crimson, and a nice roll of paint on the palette knife. And I'm basically starting off with just touching the canvas and letting the knife do its work. And you can see that I'm creating different slopes on the mountain by rotating the knife side to side. There's a nice view there how flat this is, and you just want to keep moving around with this first loading of the knife, and then of course wipe the brush before reloading again. So I'm looking for my highlights, the most highlights, like the brightest highlights here, and just touching the canvas. There's not a lot of pressure. There's not a lot of I'm not trying to ice the canvas with like an icing on the cake. I'm just letting it come off the palette knife. And shadow color, I used a little bit of ultramarine blue and even less of the ivory black with a white to create my shadow color. And then I just go back and forth between the two. In between, you want to make sure that you are wiping your knife before you reload. So this does take a little bit of practice, and my few mountains that when I first started were really not that great, but that's just part of the process. And if you're expecting something right out of the bat, right out of the go to get the similar result, you're setting a way too big of an expectation for yourself, which you don't want. You want to be very careful of the expectations you set when you start to learn to paint. You want to create those little small confident wins that you can just keep compounding and keep building upon. Those are the most important things when learning how to paint or learning any kind of skill. So just again with the shadow and just finding some shadow slopes, and then just wiping the brush off, the knife. Palette palette knife painting is very, very, very nice. Creates nice textures for the feel of the mountain. That's why it's very effective to use this. So I'm coming forward with another peak here, and there's the angle of the knife that I'm holding it at, and of course you'll be moving the angle around, angling it more, less, and then of course rotating left to right as you paint, creating different slope textures and slope angles as well. So now I'm just using the small part of the knife, you can see there, right? So here I'm not reloading it, I'm just kind of moving the paint that's already on the canvas, which is another way you can create some interesting slopes in your mountain. I believe this painting took me 3 hours, maybe less. The more you paint, of course, the less time it's going to be taking to paint it. So take your time and start small. This is a small canvas, 20 by 10 inch. And I just chose to kind of practice all this. So one thing I want to mention is when I started the outline of the mountain with my knife, the background was wet, so the sky was set in already on there, so the paint was much easier to move around. So basically you have 3 steps to this. You have the base layer of the mountain, that's kind of a dark color in between the light and the shadow, right? So it's very dark, and then you just kind of build from there. You start to add the highlights and then add the shadows as well. The most important thing about this is that the underpainting or the base layer is not very oily, right? So that's why I used the shop towel to make sure that I removed as much oil as I could and any excess paint that was built up in there. I find that if I use just the brush, it's not enough. I try to use the shop towel as well, or any kind of towel. Back to the small edge of the knife and just kind of making little drops here in the slope. Just making interesting things happening here. There are no I don't have a reference here, so but I do paint from reference, and sometimes it's much more gratifying just to do your own compositions. It's much more fulfilling, I'd say. That's the word I'm looking for. So this one, this kind of palette knife work with oil paint is a little bit more advanced, I would say. It's still a beginning stages. There's not too much detail, and we're just using one knife and just kind of and one subject, right? If I had some trees in there and then I had to deal with the trees and things like that, I would probably let this dry first, and then I would add some trees, tree tops, because this is pretty high point of view overlooking the mountain. And just some nice interesting tips of the peaks where I thought the light might hit the peaks. The light is from the right. That's one thing I forgot to say, as you can see with the highlights and how I place them. Of course, you don't have to put the highlights on the right side. You can put them on the left side, and then your light source is going to be from the left. And just moving through here, finishing off with a little bit more of the highlights here towards the foreground. This mountain looks kind of foreshortened, meaning that there's some shape and the distance in it. Not too much. So I didn't want too much distance here. I wanted this to be the main practice for me as I practice some of the palette knife work here. If you'd like to see the full tutorial for this painting, please let me know down in the comments, and I do have all the footage, so I can edit that for you and just kind of walk through the whole process. I think this painting took about, like I said, 3 hours probably, so it's quite a adventure for oil painting. 1-inch brush and then straight into titanium white. You saw me putting on a little bit of titanium white on the bottom there, so I'm going to do some misting here, and then I'm just kind of making sure that I am loading the brush evenly on the bristles, and then I'm just going to create some mist here on the corner of my brush. I'm creating some mist on the drop that I had there with on the mountain. Yeah, so just be very careful. I'm just being kind of careful here with moving the paint and just kind of diffusing it in a way a little bit, and then at the edges I'm going to be a little bit more intentional here as I add more mist at the edges. So straight into titanium white and just finding some more of the highlights here. And just keep reloading, and these are the final touches that I'm adding on here of pure titanium white. You can see it on the panel, on the palette there. It's nice and flat, and I just kind of pick off little rolls of paint on my knife. So if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments section. I'm always happy to help and to kind of know what you're struggling with, so I can also create these videos as well, and paintings for beginners. Although this is not for the total beginner, it's more of a intermediate beginner, but let me know what you're struggling with so I can help you. If you like this video, and if you like the way I'm kind of narrating this and teaching, then you might want to check out this next video on how to paint. This particular mountain was done with a synthetic brush and a hog bristle brush, so no palette knife there, just for mixing.